Welcome. Today's post is, Court Comms, Invoking Perry Mason. Published on September 7, 2023. What does it mean to invoke the ultimate lawyer? Here are the topics we'll be decoding today. You can always find this list in the description below. If you enjoy this video, please press the like button, and subscribe for weekly full-length blog posts, and shorter, more shareable videos. Let's begin. Note, you can also read the rough draft of this post on Twitter. Link in the description. How to invoke the ultimate lawyer. Some stars were not born on the day claimed. The reason for this is a lesson in comms utility. September 21, 1957. Mark Levin born, the most famous right-wing lawyer alive today. September 21, 1957. Perry Mason premieres, most popular courtroom series of all time. If you know Mark Levin, you know this connection is too perfect to be coincidence. He is known today for his radio audience of millions, but his origin and expertise has always been as a lawyer. He was chief of staff for the Attorney General under Ronald Reagan. He then became the president of the Landmark Legal Foundation. He has written entire books on the courts. So for him to share an origin date with the greatest lawyer in fiction? Not a coincidence. Do you understand why this connection is a thing? It's simple utility really. Consider Mark Levin's prominence origins under Reagan. Ronald Reagan needed a Perry Mason, and so his allies gave him one. They took the smartest legal guy nobody knew and gave him a birth date to communicate it. No need to say it, with that birth date everyone knew, this is our Perry Mason. Given Iran-Contra, yeah, he needed a famous defense lawyer. He was also deeply involved in picking SCOTUS nominees for Reagan. But even though I decode Mark Levin equals Perry Mason. What then was the original point of Perry Mason? Perry Mason. All famous comms have an origin and point. Perry Mason began in 1933, but the first book doesn't have courtroom scenes, which are the most famous thing about the series. When they began Perry Mason movies in 1934, they chose to begin with the fourth book. That film is still considered the best of all Perry Mason films. Which, given it all happened in the span of a year, that fourth book and film were likely the original point of Perry Mason. I say book, but actually it was all serialized in magazines back then. Let's look at both and find clues. Note the star, Mary Astor. This tells me I should be looking at Astor's in 1934. Astor, if you aren't familiar, fought the central banks trying to take over until 1912. Titanic was used to remove the final roadblock, but that doesn't mean they all vanished. Taking a lifesaver mint began in 1912 as a way to suggest others side with the mint, i.e. Fed. Or end up like Astor, who had no life preserver. And it worked as they passed the legislation months after. Others too, but let's get back to 1933-1934. Defendant in Perry Mason equals Mary Astor. Astor plus married. January 17, 1934. Perry Mason fourth work case of the Howling Dog begins serialization. January 22, 1934. Astor breakup blames parents of fiancé. February 6, 1934. Planned Astor wedding fails. March 17, 1934. Perry Mason case Howling Dog ends. Note this: Astor was billed as the Titanic baby. Born 4 months after Titanic, and this was the fourth Perry Mason work, which seems to have been what Perry Mason built up to. That four connection may be nothing, but big names are often faces for groups. Points are known because they were publicized at the time, which means they were likely comms. Astor had a famous breakup during serialization and his publicly announced wedding plans were cancelled. A story about a howling police dog. This story was written month to month, so depending on what happened with Astor the story could change. Marriage cancelled equals what was symbolized, i.e. two groups getting together, didn't. After divorce, police stops howling and story of Astor ends with no conviction. Wedding was supposed to be February 1934. March 2, 1934. New feat in study of radioactivity, artificial disintegration of atom produced. Artificial radioactivity from non-radioactive substances. Without mobilizing police, they got results with simple, what if, using Perry Mason. By doing nothing but sending a comm about a future case, they were able to get an enemy to back down. I notice Astor went to Shanghai, China right after. Partnership may have been tied to them. With FDR president and Great Depression started, efforts made to control opponents. That hypothesis is not solid. I need to dig more into that specific Astor as FDR and China. They probably weren't big fans of one another given the Roosevelt's history with the Opium War, so it makes a certain amount of sense, but it's unclear until digs. Especially since Astor also was tied to the Opium War and blackmail, but let's move on. Barr-Epstein. When I looked at the next Perry Mason show, I found something strange. This is a long shot, but it's interesting. September 16, 1973. New Perry Mason show begins. September 17, 1973. Bill Barr's father Donald publishes Space Relations, an allegory about elites and child sex trafficking. There are several fascinating things about this story. 1. The writer was the father of Bill Barr, who is best known for being Trump's Attorney General. 2. At the time, Donald Barr was headmaster at a school that had just hired Jeffrey Epstein. 3. The subject was child sex trafficking of elites. The basic elements are confirmed across the media, and given what we now know about Perry Mason comms, it might have been a threat of legal actions. This was as Watergate was ongoing and just before Church Committee. It exposed a sliver of MK, but never did touch blackmail. If it were just that, I wouldn't have shared it. But there was another Perry Mason reboot. June 21, 2020. Perry Mason debut, investigation of dead and kidnapped child. June 21, 2020. Epstein partner Ghislaine Maxwell reported as hiding from feds in Paris. There were many comms tied to Maxwell's arrest. June 21, 2020. Asteroid the size of Eiffel Tower in France headed towards Earth this week. June 21, 2020. Maxwell reported hiding in France. Who else could be a comm for the most important trial but Perry Mason? Also interesting is this Donald Barr article. The abuse story in the novel has a Morgan demanding someone sexually assault a teenager. Morgan is an interesting name to use for the villain in that context. Notice the sidebar. August 15, 2023. Emails show J.P. Morgan working with Jeffrey Epstein to lure Google co-founder Sergey Brin as client, court docs. I've covered J.P. Morgan quite a few times recently, and this week the big news story in that case connects the two. It's consistent for the past 200 or so years. The Morgan Bank being what appears to be the American arm of the Rothschilds. If not that, then at the very least consistent allies from origin to modern times. I'll elaborate on Barr-Epstein as the connection is confusing without context. Donald Barr was OSS, the pre-CIA CIA. So there was a history to the family in comms. Likely Bill Barr was carrying on an established symbol from his father. Bill Barr was AG not just for Trump but H.W. Bush. Mark Levin worked under Reagan's AG, and his primary comm was tied to the first Perry Mason show, so having the next president pick an AG tied to the next Perry Mason is consistent. Albeit we are talking about his father. The word Barr is a common legal one. So if Donald Barr had important comms to be sent back, then tied to Epstein, who worked at the same place. A school in Manhattan, project. Donald Barr began in 1964, which is the same year that Epstein-Barr herpes was discovered. Sexually transmitted disease. I've covered Epstein comms in famous shows. February 22, 1993, Babylon 5: The Gathering, starring Jeffrey Sin as captain. February 22, 1993, Jeffrey Epstein buys Zorro, New Mexico ranch. The ranch he brought important people from around the world for blackmail. Reconcile Babylon 5 premise. Babylon 5 shares a distinction with another show of the same year called Sequest DSV. Both involve UN parodies as the boss, and they were the first shows to ever use computer graphics for all the effects. There is an important reason I bring this connection up. September 12, 1993, new Perry Mason actor William Burr death. September 12, 1993, seaQuest DSV debut. January 20, 1993, William Barr Attorney General end. William Burr/William Barr. That may explain the name. Symbolism of an end to court danger. This was as Clinton got in. Both shows involved the UN parody as the boss. Zorro Masked Ranch. Babylon 5 Jeffrey Sin as captain. May 5, 08/1962 CERN First Council. May 6, 1952, Jeffrey Sin, Michael O'Hare, born Babylon 5 captain actor. February 22, 1993, Babylon 5 debut. February 22, 1993, Jeffrey Epstein buys Zorro Ranch. Reconcile those connections tying UN and the Zorro Ranch of Epstein with the plot. Babylon 5 is a space show, set up alien diplomacy station. Neutral territory between 5 empires. Epstein's character settles international situations with collected secret information. Why Zorro Ranch? Why aliens? Define aliens. November 8, 1940, Mark of Zorro debut foreign alien, comes to LA to fix corruption. November 10, 1940, Walt Disney begins as an informer for the LA office of the FBI report Hollywood Subversives. November 12, 1940, Batman trademarked. Aliens is a word that defines people affiliated with a foreign government. Masked Zorro is a symbol of anonymity. Carving of a Z is anonymously exposing villains with testimony. Zorro has a secret identity defined as a man of letters to fight injustice. Both Zorro and Disney were in Los Angeles. Note the Batman connection as well, as Batman was not only trademarked at the same time, but this Zorro was the very film that inspired Batman in multiple official canons. Disney being an FBI informant was likely representing a host of people with that as the face of it. That's the point of anonymity after all. Donning a disguise and creating a system of communications. His partner uses charades and sign language to communicate. You may wonder how blackmail fits into things with Disney in relation to Epstein. What was the love interest for Zorro? Lolita Q. October 16, 1923, Linda Darnell, Lolita Q. Zorro born. October 16, 1923, Walt Disney founded. October 16, 1923, Disney Alice in Wonderland Comedies Virginia as Alice. Disney would make its own version of Zorro a few years later starring Guy, whose other most famous role was as the star of Lost in Space. September 15, 1965, Lost in Space debut Guy Williams. September 15, 1965, I Spy Bill Cosby breakout as international spy. September 12, 1965, Sound of Silence. September 15, 1965, Big Mouth episode, Dick Van Dyke reveals Alan Brady is bald, ranked 8th greatest episode of TV ever by TV Guide. Guy Lost in Space star and Zorro. Cosby later played as Guy Hanks, 44 million winner helping police post-retirement. September 15, 1964, Man from UNCLE Vulcan Affair pilot spy show. September 15, 1965, I Spy, Bill Cosby International Spy. September 8, 1966, Star Trek pilot, Vulcan. These spy shows connect with space shows. International becomes intergalactic. UN becomes Space Federation. Yet another, Guy, Anonymous, is the British agent from the original 007 Bond book. April 13, 1953, Casino Royale James Bond debut. April 13, 1953, MKUltra approved by Alan Dulles. Alan equals alien. MKUltra ops were not known by the participants, which is why. The following year there is this famous story of the POTUS meeting alien ambassadors. Highlighted by CodeMonkeyZ yesterday. The story involves Ike and two different types of aliens. Nordic and Greys. The AP reported Ike died of a heart attack in Palm Springs that day. Why report his death? Sounds like a reaction to Ike siding with the Nordics. They issued a correction, but the comm sends the message. That's official history. The alien stuff is all comms, of course, but they really did report his death the same day. Eisenhower refused to give up nuclear weapons, and so did not come to agreement with the Nordics. Instead, he came to agreement with the Greys to let humans be kidnapped without their awareness so long as they were returned. Nuclear being a comm tied to booms. This includes use of blackmail. The first nuclear weapon could only be made with oil from sperm whales. No other oil would do, only sperm. So he wasn't willing to give up the government blackmail ops. I mentioned Guy playing as Zorro, non-identified male, i.e. mask, with Lolita as love interest. Let's look at that date. October 8, 1957. Great Balls of Fire recorded. October 10, 1957. Zorro Disney premiere. October 11, 1957. First major nuclear accident. October 11, 1957. Leave It to Beaver TV Guide 40-second greatest TV episode. Note that Leave It to Beaver episode is famous for being delayed due to censors not allowing anyone to ever show a toilet. I've covered Leave It to Beaver as a symbol before. The famously wholesome front is a comm. October 4, 1957. Leave It to Beaver debut. October 4, 1957. Sputnik first satellite launched. October 4, 1957. Eleanor Roosevelt returns to the USA from Russia trip. January 4, 1958. Sputnik returns to Earth. January 4, 1958. Edmund Hillary first vehicle ride to Antarctica Pole. The reporting on that satellite as the Red's baby moon. Roosevelt returned from Russia alongside the Sputnik launch. The point with Leave It to Beaver being timed is a symbol tied to the main character, Theodore, as in Teddy Roosevelt comm. First episode Teddy expelled recruited to play Smokey the Bear. Teddy Roosevelt is a comm I go over frequently. November 1902. Peter Pan original story. November 1902. Teddy Roosevelt origin of Teddy Bear. A symbol of using children for blackmail without their awareness. In other words, kidnapped by aliens. That episode had Teddy/Beaver give fire as an excuse. Transcript picture. October 4, 1957. Sputnik. October 4, 1957. Beaver expelled. October 8, 1957. Great Balls of Fire. October 10, 1957. Zorro Disney premiere. October 11, 1957. First nuclear accident, fire. October 11, 1957. Leave It to Beaver, Captain Jack, most famous episode. That was the beginning of the space race. The connection to blackmail is how control is taken over individual agents. To control the space. South Park's use of it as well as their comms tied to Teddy. In both cases connecting to molestation. March 19, 1983. Leave It to Beaver sequel. March 21, 1983. U2 Sunday Bloody Sunday. There are many news stories about the cover to this album. The point of violence juxtaposed with that. Beaver as alternative to war. Album described as pedophilic. May 1, 1960. U2 incident Gary Powers shot down by USSR. May 10, 1960. Bono of U2 born. May 10, 1960. Soviet Communications Gary Powers. August 1, 1977. U2 Gary Powers spy death crash. August 3, 1977. MKUltra hearing. The response to Sputnik. December 6, 1957. First U.S. satellite launch failure. December 6, 1957. Teamsters most powerful union kicked out of Labor Federation. The symbol being a rejection of being a satellite, as Jimmy Hoffa rejected the terms. The hearings had accusations of Hoffa trying to gain control of the nation's economy to set up a private government. Illustrates just how much power was involved. The reaction to this threat was in trying to gain control of these cells and if not remove them. Also that same week was the first gold record certified. December 3, 1957, catch a falling star and put it in your pocket, first gold record. December 6, 1957, first U.S. satellite failure. Sputnik kicked off the space race which led to the creation of NASA. First logo was gold. Ray Chandler Chandrayaan Space. This brings us back to how control is taken in relation to Epstein. Consider Ray Chandler and the posts made. July 6, 2019, Epstein arrest date. July 11, 2019, more than a dozen women unknown to law enforcement come forward with sexual abuse allegations against Epstein. July 22, 2019, Chandrayaan-2 launch. Chandrayaan equals Rachel Chandler. What is Ray Chandler as a symbol? Well, the most famous, Ray Chandler, is the close relative of Jordan Chandler. The family that brought down Michael Jackson with evidence of perversion with children. That seems to be the symbolism in the name. The first, Chandrayaan, was famous for being the first to find water on the moon. September 23, 2009, Chandrayaan water found announced. September 22, 2009, leaked clip of Jacko penguin dance. As always, water equals info as a com. Note the description of the water. Invisible film found. Note Ray Chandler's profile pic. Serene as the moonlit snow. Lit up moon plus water. Michael Jackson officially died just months before that. Could be a ducking message for those implicated in whatever data was collected. Could be real, but given the pattern and especially given his penguin leak, it's more likely a duck com. I made this post as the Chandrayaan probe was launching, same day. August 23, 2023, India's Chandrayaan-3 probe to attempt historic moon landing today. A bit of history on moon landings. August 9, 1976, final moon landing for 37 years. It wouldn't be until December 14, 2013 with China's lander that this practice would continue. What to make of that giant pause starting in 1977? August 9, 1976, final moon landing for 37 years. August 1, 1977, U-2 Gary Powers spy death crash. August 3, 1977, MKUltra hearing. August 3, 1977, Tom Brady born. August 4, 1977, Q clearance DOE begins. It's possible moon landings were a retired practice post DOE changes. U-2 ends, Brady begins. August 10, 2023, Russia to launch first moon lander since 1976 in race with Indian spacecraft. Russia to seek ice near the south pole of the moon. This one crashed, but I don't necessarily think that's a bad com. Russia to launch first moon lander since 1976 in race with Indian spacecraft. August 21, 2023, Russia's Luna 25 lander has crashed into the moon. If these moon landers are symbols of getting/using evidence, then India makes more sense. There has been so much Russia demonization that it would weaken any revelations. Russia's Luna 25 lander has crashed into the moon. Luna 25, Russia's first moon mission in nearly a half-century, was the vanguard of a planned series of lunar probes. Don't misunderstand, I don't think the reveals are going to be done by a country itself, i.e., India, though that would be amazing, but perhaps an entity tied to them. Someone not polarizing. We might get clarity by comparing the old comms. October 2008, Chandrayaan-1 launch. October 2008, Epstein begins work release from jail. July 2009, Epstein is released from jail. August 2009, Chandrayaan-1 last contact. Once again Chandrayaan equals Ray Chandler symbolism. July 6, 2019. Epstein arrest date. July 11, 2019. More than a dozen women unknown to law enforcement come forward with sexual abuse allegations against Epstein. July 22, 2019. Chandrayaan 2 launch. And given what we know about Epstein, what happened to Chandrayaan 2? August 2019. Epstein official death. September 2019. Chandrayaan 2 crash. And the specific day. September 26, 2017. Equals Russia hides a military-base nuclear accident. Plus 1 day. September 27, 2017. Equals CIA blackmailer Hefner dead. August 9, 2019. Equals Russia hides a military-base nuclear accident. Plus 1 day. August 10, 2019. Equals CIA blackmailer Epstein dead. July 22, 2019. In-N-Out Burger found mint condition in New York. July 22, 2019. Epstein alive and well after failed suicide attempt. In New York. August 16, 2019. Maxwell spotted In-N-Out Burger reading Secret Lives and Deaths of CIA Operatives. When we line up Chandrayaan comms, it is clearly tied to Epstein. Which means the new one is likely tied to Maxwell. August 19, 2020. 3 Ghislaine Maxwell revered by inmates for not working with feds while in the worst part of jail. She didn't crack. Now it says she didn't crack, but that's the official position. The reality may be quite different. November 13, 2021. Raw sewage and rat droppings in Ghislaine Maxwell's cell. December 29, 2021. Jeffrey Epstein associate Maxwell guilty on 5 of 6 counts in sex trafficking. December 29, 2021. Pentagon building new secret courtroom at Guantanamo Bay for mid-2023. As in, it's only recently built and ready with an expectation of handling people covertly. The Pentagon's secret courtroom was due mid-2023, which makes that right around the same time as this one. May 31, 2023. Maxwell fears retaliation after snitching on 2 violent inmates. She brought evidence of blackmail to authorities. Just found out seconds ago. August 23, 2023. India becomes 4th country to land on the moon, first on the South Pole, with Chandrayaan 3 spacecraft. Landing was a success. India becomes 4th country to land on the moon, first on the South Pole, with Chandrayaan 3 spacecraft. The feat makes India the 4th country, after Russia, the US and China, to land on the moon, and the first to land on one of the moon's lunar poles. Countdown, to what? September 26, 2020. Joe Biden, I got to the Senate 180 years ago. Plus 180 days equals March 25, 2021. March 25, 2021. Joe Biden, when I came to the US Senate 120 years ago. March 25, 2021. Olympic torch begins its 121-day journey around Japan starting at the nuclear disaster site. March 25, 2021. Plus 120 days equals July 23, 2021. July 23, 2021. Japan Olympic torch passing event ends. July 23, 2021. Joe Biden, 150 years ago I was chairman of the judiciary. July 23, 2021. Tokyo Olympics. Plus 150 days. December 20, 2021. Maxwell jury deliberations begin. December 20, 2021. Biden dog commander arrives. Judicial countdown. December 20, 2021. Maxwell jury deliberations begin December 20, 2021. Biden dog commander arrives in Washington. And this week? August 21, 2023. Washington Commanders end Ravens record 24-game preseason win streak. Which brings us back to the moon lander being a success. Moonlit snow. Ravens. I covered the Baltimore Ravens loss, but I didn't decode them. I'm not certain, but the 6 ravens of the Tower of London come to mind. They are often talked of in relation to the royal family. Legend holds that if there is not at least 6 ravens the kingdom will collapse. That Ravens preseason winning streak began in 2016, which is when Virginia launched the case against Maxwell/Epstein in relation to Prince Andrew. Q highlighted this connection many times. Note the pose in both pictures suggesting oral sex. Intentionally taken to signify what blackmail is held on an important figure. Note also the sequence Q uses. Child shoes plus addiction plus old job plus kids in mirrors. Oral sex symbol plus child shoes addiction plus old job plus children shown from many angles via mirrors, many photographs. The Queen's official, favorite child reaching a settlement tied to that photo. This is probably why there have been so many exits as of late. Should the ravens leave the tower, a great harm will befall the kingdom, it will crumble into dust, the Raven Master said. January 14, 2021. Queen Raven leaves Tower of London, will kingdom crumble? February 22, 2021. Prince Philip fake obituary. February 24, 2021. Statue of Queen Elizabeth beheaded, head has not been recovered. April 9, 2021. Prince Philip death. Jeffrey Epstein, dies at age 66, 6 months. Prince Philip, dies at age 99, 9 months. 2009, Prince Philip truffle trees fail to birth. 2009, Rachel Chandler tattoos lip with truffle. Not giving birth equals not going public. Only in 2018 did the black diamond truffles bear fruit. Which is when cases were scandalous enough that settlements were made by his son. Mug shot of the century. August 24, 2023. Fukushima radioactive waste dumped in the ocean may cause mutant animals, says expert. Fukushima nuclear disaster was a part of the judicial countdown. Nuclear water released. What else happened that day? August 24, 2023. Trump is set to surrender at a Georgia jail on charges he sought to overturn his 2020 election loss. Trump is set to surrender at a Georgia jail on charges he sought to overturn his 2020 election loss. Water equals info as always. So that nuclear water release is likely evidence that will put certain parties in legal crosshairs. As I've long decoded, the 4th indictment, arrest, sends a message. A public show to those in crosshairs soon, this is you. Think about it. The very person they tried to ruin being their own avatar. The very event they wished to see more than any other being a show of their own downfall. It's poetic. Their own blind followers cheering every revelation all the while they know the truth. Flips notwithstanding, of course, because that's the point of it all. The show has long been a slow-burning campaign to get as many people to flip and cooperate as possible. To take deals and testify. How many times was, "Enjoy the show," said? Think about why. What was the show, if not actors playing parts? Think about this quote. "Stay with me, deplorables, you'll love how this movie ends." What was / is the movie if not what we are seeing now? Due to my decoding this is obvious, but even without you can look at the circumstances and reach similar conclusions. Because if things weren't like I decode, why would Twitter suddenly become a bastion of free speech? It's all preparation. Heat wave peak. If people are told it's record-breaking heat, many will perceive it that way regardless of reality. It's a placebo. It's entirely plausible these heat waves are no more than regular and only being discussed as calms. 4th indictment leads to the first mugshot. Mugshot of the century. A reader of mine suggested something interesting about this too. They suggested before this headline went up that this was the mugshot heard around the world. They specifically connected it to the Q posts with that phrase in it. And when we look at those, take a look at context. Q uses the phrase exactly 4 times. Social media is called out. Another highlights D-class POTUS. Judgment Day was the post directly after with a highlight on evidence tied to conducting using private email addresses. D-Class. Judgment. 4 times. 4.4 billion for Twitter. Fourth indictment and so many more. Q called out the pre-D-Class August 1, 2019 setting up the Hot 1 to 12. And of course August 2019. 4 years equals 2023. The Hot D-Class Countdown. We've had nothing but record-breaking heat news this month. Alongside the mug shot heard around the world, are ongoing attempts of Elon Musk to physically confront a fleeing Zuckerberg. Possibly a symbol of apprehending criminals, mug shot, who are doing everything possible to avoid being taken in. I noticed the fourth indictment mugshot was in Atlanta. The same place Q highlighted in relation to Biden 666 comms. The Joe Biden presidential campaign. Always intended to be built up and fail. To be the devil. Let's look at the recent game market for clues on legal comms. Court comms in new games, Forspoken. A new IP and cost more than 100 million. That puts it on par with the 10th most expensive ever, and all those lists are clogged with sequels. With a budget that big, it's sure to be a meaningful comms vehicle, and what I found demanded a decode. By minute 17 I bet many readers would have a clear idea of what the basic symbolism at play is. The game begins inside a courtroom where the main character is on trial for attempted grand larceny. They have a long criminal record and are guilty. The defendant's fate is in the hands of the judge. Relevant future court cases, future is here. The most important and consistent symbol in this game begins with this scene. The cuffs. The judge chooses not to throw her in prison and instead takes off her cuffs and releases her with the promise of doing 120 hours of community service. After a few scenes I'll cover later, she gives her cat, Homer, to the judge that sentenced her. Symbolism for being under control by another person. Not the judge specifically, but in service to the law in exchange for leniency. Flipping on criminals. Less than a minute after giving the cat to the judge, the protagonist finds what she calls a cuff. She puts it on and is then transported to a magical world, unable to take off the handcuffs from this point forward. She finds monsters and uses the magic handcuffs to fight them. Symbolism of testimony locking up other criminals. Just as before, she becomes the judge's pet and can now attack monsters by turning them over. Let's go back to scenes I skipped over as they more sense with context we now have. Right after court we learn she is part of a criminal organization stealing on behalf of a violent boss. The people to flip on. Criminal boss plot never comes up again. She goes home and attempts to flee with the money she had built up from thievery. The criminal gang sets fire to her house, and she chooses to save her cat instead of dirty money. As in turning on criminal syndicate. Notice Alice in Wonderland. Notice the trailer for the game. The main character constantly being chased by an elk/DOE/Q. Symbol of the Q past criminal acts chasing people who fly with charges. To the ends of the earth, choice is yours. So going back to the actual game. After giving her cat, home, to the judge and finding the magic prison handcuffs, she is transported on a one-way trip she can't return from. Now flipped, she sees a dragon and hides. As that is a symbol of the criminal syndicate. Dragon equals many working as one. Instead of taking on the dragon, she goes to a bridge and takes on smaller monsters. Note this line after doing so about, I'll probably fly next, as this is a symbol of running away. Handcuffs reject running away. A line that can't be crossed. Established comms become more consistent over time. I'll give an example from a very different genre. In One Piece, the heroes try to help a skeleton run away from a villain, i.e., fly, and before they do, the criminal holding him hostage attacks a fly to scare them. They are called flies several times in the sequence. Same arc, Sanji leaves his captain and kicks a tooth out. Teeth inside mouth equals many working together as a bite. Face equals shared banner of all, teeth, i.e. a celebrity coordinates comms for many. Right after Sanji comes back he grows tooth back. Anyway, origin of the magic handcuff is a demon named Redig. Redig equals Reddit plus Dig. Reddit famously took all of Dig's traffic. Reddit equals Maxwell. Story ends with handcuff changed to tattoo. Freedom except for stigma of crimes being public. The main thing I believe to be keeping things slow and delayed is fear of panic activation of sleepers into mass tragedies. The original intended release date of this game was May 24, 2022 before delay. Same day as third deadliest school shooting. Anyway, so the symbolism of the game is pointed at criminals looking at jail time and giving them comms to follow to flip. I went over her first arrest, but she actually gets arrested again after getting captured by the dragon. Dragon is revealed later to be her mother. The second arrest actually puts her in jail. She kicks over the toilet bucket, and then she gets someone who lets her out of there in exchange for fighting corruption. The feces bucket kick equals escape from jail may be a symbol for giving evidence. So she takes the leaders down, the first of which being a child killer. She collects their handcuffs and levels up with it. Making leveling up a plot point. Which I take to simply mean getting the arrest of someone important is the goal and rewarded. Game ends with her telepathically asking her cat to let the judge know she's following her instructions. Cat symbolism is just a symbol of seeing in the dark which fits. Ends with her holding court and slaying demons, along with Cuff. Okay, that would have been the end of the post, but I'm going to share how far readers have come. The whole point of what I do is to teach. So it's exciting whenever a reader steps up and solves something. Reader Decode. A reader noted that all hurricanes 1953 to 1978 had female names, so the first one surely had a comms name. May 25, 1953, Alice first female hurricane. May 29, 1953, Edmund Hillary climbs empty Everest. By itself this looked like little to nothing, but reconcile other decodes. I already decoded the Mount Everest climb. June 2, 1953, Mount Everest conquered by British Hillary. June 2, 1953, Coronation of Queen Elizabeth, the longest broadcast in history. June 6, 1953, Alice dissipates, 66. British conquering the highest mountain same day as Queen. This coronation was symbolism then of what? The hurricane now fits as a symbol of this storm. Moreover, it may help give us context for the new Hillary hurricane. It should be noted Hillary was slated to be Queen Hillary after her expected 2016 run. They also noted this. HRC equals Alice. Which I find interesting in relation to all of this because the original Alice in Wonderland was tied to the Queen of England. The Q post was in context of Epstein Island / Haiti / SA and other child trafficking hotspots being closed. Alice in Wonderland is a symbol tied to blackmail using children, so the two fit together. Saudi Arabia being Wonderland fit. Notice it's Alice and Wonderland November 2, 2017. The date is important because that was just before Al-Walid was arrested. The story is tied to blackmail, but the phrase, Alice and Wonderland, means something specific that was relevant that week. They don't want evidence, this is the Alice and Wonderland approach to impeachment, verdict first, evidence never. A symbol of what was to come in Saudi Arabia, that seizing was a simple thing because of the location. Much of that was my own decoding, not the readers, but they were the ones that found the initial pattern tied to the hurricane naming in many of the early points. I just finished the sentence, so to speak, lol. This wasn't their first contribution by a long shot, and they are quickly catching up to me. Won't be long before there are two of me, and that's just a start. It's only going to exponentially increase from there. Heck, imagine when we get someone who spends the time writing to make this all evocative. Look forward to it. Things are looking brighter and brighter. Telegram chat. Join the Decoding Telegram group. This has been Court Comms, Invoking Perry Mason.